The crystal waves outside the shore house rolled gently as Mark Benson sat alone at his dining table, drinking cold water from a tall glass. At 62, his hands were steady, his eyes sharp, his mind calm. He had waited 40 years to own a place like this, and tonight he wanted nothing more than peace. But at 3 a.m., the front door shook violently as fists slammed against it again and again. "Open up, old man," a drunken voice yelled. Mark rose slowly from his chair, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and whispered, "So it begins." The door shook harder. The night had turned into confrontation. When Mark unlocked the door, Eric, his son-in-law, stumbled inside with 3 of his loud, drunken friends. Eric pointed at Mark with shaky aggression. "This is my villa now," he said, slurring each word. "You've got 1 hour to pack up and disappear." His friend Dave snorted, "Hurry up, man. We want to relax." But instead of fear, Mark showed something unexpected. He took one slow sip from his glass and stepped aside. "Come in," he said calmly. "If you're here to talk, let's talk." Eric blinked, thrown off balance. He walked in, unaware of the trap waiting for him. Hours earlier, that same morning, Mark had sat in a notary's office, sunlight spilling across polished wooden desks. The notary, Mrs. Cole, slid 2 brass keys toward him. "Congratulations, Mr. Benson," she said warmly. 40 years of planning paid off. Mark lifted the keys with a steady hand, feeling the weight of sacrifice behind them. The deed sat before him, his name printed clearly, with the property address and the words "paid in full." He allowed himself a soft smile. "My wife would have loved this," he murmured. Then he stepped outside into bright August light, feeling victory rise like ocean wind. As he walked to his car, Mark dialed his daughter, Linda. "I did it," he told her proudly. "I finally bought the oceanfront place." A long silence followed before Linda asked, "Did you sign everything already?" Mark frowned. "Of course. My name is the only one on the deed." Her reply was sugar-sweet but hollow. "That's great, Dad. Really great." When the call ended, Mark sat in his parked car for several minutes, staring at the keys on his passenger seat. Something felt wrong. Something cold. But he drove home anyway, refusing to let suspicion ruin his moment. Later that afternoon, Mark packed his belongings into a rental truck, 40 years of life fitting into a neat arrangement of boxes. The drive along Highway 101 felt refreshing as the blue Pacific opened before him. He pulled over at a lookout point and breathed deeply as ocean air washed over him. Every extra shift, every skipped vacation, every sacrifice, it all returned to him in that single breathtaking view. When he finally reached the villa, he unlocked the door with those brass keys and stepped inside. Fresh paint, clean floors, open windows. Everything felt new, peaceful, and finally his. Mark walked through every room, touching the clean walls as if confirming the place was real. The kitchen smelled faintly of new granite, and the living room glowed with evening light from the ocean-facing windows. On the deck, the sky stretched wide, painted in orange and gold. He rested both hands on the railing, whispering, "Sarah, we finally made it." His late wife had dreamed of a view like this. But as peace settled over him, his phone vibrated again. Linda's name flashed. When he answered, her voice sounded forced. "Eric wants to bring you a housewarming surprise tomorrow," she said quickly. Mark's jaw tightened. Nothing about her tone felt like celebration. "Linda, what kind of surprise?" Mark asked, but she avoided the question. "Just something small. He'll explain." Her rushed tone only deepened his suspicion. "Is everything all right?" he pressed. "Everything's fine," she insisted, then hung up before he could respond. Mark lowered the phone slowly, staring at the darkening horizon. Eric was a man who asked too many questions about Mark's savings, a man who always smiled with hidden calculation. He had married Linda 5 years earlier, and though Mark welcomed him, he never fully trusted him. Tonight, his instincts whispered the same warning. "Be ready." Mark tried sleeping, but his body refused to rest. He lay in the dark listening to waves crash softly outside, while uneasy thoughts circled his mind like shadows. At 1 a.m., he sat up and drank water. At 2 o'clock, he stood by the window watching the moonlit beach. Every instinct told him something was coming, something planned, something dangerous. When the clock reached 3 a.m., pounding erupted at the door, violent enough to shake the frame. "Open up," a drunken voice shouted. Mark closed his eyes for a moment, exhaled slowly, and whispered, "There it is." Then he moved toward the noise, calm as stone. He flicked on the kitchen light, filled another glass of cold water, and took his time with each sip even as the pounding grew louder. When he finally opened the door, Eric stood swaying on the porch, face red, breath heavy with alcohol. Behind him were three men, Dave, Scott, and a stranger with a loud laugh. "Old man," Eric barked, "you have 1 hour to move out. This villa belongs to us now." Mark didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped aside. "Come in," he said softly. "If you want to talk ownership, let's talk inside." The men exchanged confused looks. They weren't expecting calm. Inside, the men spread through the living room like they already owned the place. Dave pointed at the windows. "Nice view. Better than our apartments." Scott smirked. "We'll fix this up when we move in." Eric planted himself in front of Mark, trying to look powerful. "Linda said you would sign everything over," he claimed. "We're taking this house. Tonight." Mark placed his glass gently on the table. "Did Linda also tell you what I did yesterday?" he asked quietly. Eric scoffed. "You bought a house. Big deal." Mark's faint smile returned. "Not just that," he said, voice steady. "You boys walked into a plan you don't understand." Mark walked past Eric and the others, heading toward the hallway with quiet confidence. "You want documents, don't you?" he asked, not looking back. Eric followed quickly, eagerness flashing across his drunken face. "Exactly," he said. "Bring them out, and let's finish this." Dave laughed, patting the wall. "Feels good already. Like home." Mark pretended not to notice. He kept walking toward the study at the end of the hall, where moonlight spilled across his desk. Inside that room waited the beginning of their downfall. Mark opened the study door and stepped aside. Eric barged in first, rubbing his hands like he already owned everything inside. "All right, old man," he said. "Where's the deed? Where's the transfer paper? Let's speed this up." Mark walked to his desk drawer, opened it slowly, and pulled out a neat stack of folders. Eric leaned forward, eyes shining with greed. "Finally." Mark didn't hand them over. Instead, he asked calmly, "Tell me, Eric, when Linda called you earlier, what exactly did she tell you?" Eric frowned, annoyed. "What does that matter?" Mark's smile sharpened. "It matters more than you think." Eric rolled his eyes. "She said you bought the place with all your retirement savings. She said you'd probably be confused, maybe overwhelmed, and you'd agree to put her name on the deed." Dave snorted behind him. "Sounds right." Mark lifted the first folder. "And you believed her," he said quietly. "Without question." Eric crossed his arms. "Of course. She's your daughter. She knows you." Mark nodded once. "Interesting." He flipped the folder open, revealing pages stamped and signed. "Because what she said, and what I actually did, are two very different things." Eric stepped closer. "Stop with the games," he snapped. "Give me the deed." Mark turned the folder for him to see. "This isn't a deed transfer," he said. "It's proof of something else." Eric squinted at the pages, drunken confusion slowing his understanding. "What is this?" Mark replied calmly, "Protection. Legal protection. Protection from desperate people." Scott shifted uncomfortably in the doorway. "What's he talking about?" Mark closed the folder and set it on the desk. "Irrevocable trust," he said. "Filed yesterday morning. This villa belongs to me for life. No one can take it. Not Linda. Not Eric. Not anyone." Eric's face drained of color. "What?" he croaked. Mark picked up another folder. "This one," he said, "contains evidence of something else I discovered. Public record. Your financial troubles." Eric stiffened. Dave asked, "What financial troubles?" Mark tapped the folder lightly. "Unpaid taxes. Failed investments. Loans you can't repay." Eric's voice cracked. "That has nothing to do with this." Mark stepped closer, lowering his voice. "It has everything to do with it. You wanted this villa to save yourself. You tried to push me out because you needed my home to fix your life." Eric lunged forward, trying to grab the folder, but Mark pulled it back calmly. "Don't," he warned. Scott stepped between them. "Eric, man, this is looking bad." Eric shoved him aside. "Shut up. He's lying. Mark opened the folder and revealed printed pages. These aren't lies. These are your documents. Your debts. Your signatures. Eric stared, mouth trembling. For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. Mark continued, and just so you know, everything happening right now is being recorded. Eric froze. Recorded. Mark nodded toward the hallway. Security cameras. Every doorway. Every word. Every threat. Dave cursed softly. Man, we need to go. Scott backed toward the door. This is not what you said it would be. But Eric dug his heels in, shaking with anger. No, he shouted. He owes us. Linda deserves this place. Mark folded his arms. Does she? A daughter who lied? A son-in-law who breaks into a home at 3 a.m.? Tell me, Eric, does that sound like someone who deserves a house? Eric's hands clenched into fists. You think you're smart, old man, he growled. But you don't know what we've done. Mark's brow lifted. Then enlighten me. Eric swallowed hard, rage and panic mixing in his expression. We talked to your relatives, he said. Your old work friends. Your neighbors. Told them you were losing your memory. Told them you were making bad decisions. Mark's jaw tightened. Go on. Dave whispered, man, shut up, but Eric kept going. We had to make people believe you weren't stable. That way when we went to court, Mark's eyes narrowed. Court. Eric looked trapped. If you didn't sign the house over, we were going to file for control of your finances. Say you weren't fit to manage anything. The room fell into thick silence. Only the sound of waves outside moved the air. Mark spoke first, voice calm but cold enough to cut steel. You planned to declare me incompetent? Eric stammered. It was Linda's idea. She said it was the only way. Mark's voice dropped. And you went along with it gladly. Eric shook his head wildly. I thought. Mark stepped closer, his expression unwavering. You thought I was weak. You thought I was alone. You thought you could bully an old man and take everything he worked for. Eric's silence was confirmation. Mark gathered both folders and tapped them neatly on the desk. Here's what's going to happen now, he said. You and your friends are going to leave. Quietly. Eric blinked angrily. Or what? Mark leaned forward, lowering his voice. Or I call the police, and show them the footage of 4 men breaking into my home at 3 a.m. The threats. The coercion. The plan to steal my property. Dave whispered urgently, Eric, we need to go. This is over. Scott nodded quickly. He's got US dead to rights. Eric stared at Mark, rage and fear battling in his eyes. But for the first time, he said nothing. Mark walked past Eric and opened the study door wider, letting the moonlight spill across the floor. Out, he repeated, calm and steady. Dave grabbed Eric's arm. He's done, man. We can't fight this. But Eric jerked away, breathing hard like a cornered animal. He doesn't get to win, he muttered, voice thick with drunken pride. Mark picked up his phone. Last chance, Eric. The silence stretched thin. Finally, Scott yanked the front door open. I'm not going to jail for you, he snapped. One by one, the men shuffled out, but Eric lingered, staring at Mark with simmering hatred. You'll regret this, Eric hissed, pointing a shaking finger. Mark didn't blink. I already regret allowing a man like you into my family. Eric's jaw locked, and he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The house fell quiet again, the kind of quiet that carried the weight of truth revealed. Mark stood in the hallway for a moment, letting the anger drain from his chest. Then he walked to the windows and watched their car speed away, fishtailing across the gravel. He whispered to himself, this is only the beginning. And he knew he was right. The next morning, the sky was pale and soft over the Pacific. Mark sat at his kitchen table, folders spread before him. He knew Eric wouldn't give up. Men like him didn't walk away from greed, they doubled down. Mark picked up his phone and made his first call. Rebecca Young's office, a receptionist answered. I need to speak to Ms. Young, Mark said. When the attorney came on, he explained everything from the invasion to the threats. Rebecca didn't hesitate. Mr. Benson, We need to move quickly. If they file anything in court, you must be ready before they are. By noon, Mark sat in Rebecca's office, the same folder of documents resting on her desk. She studied each page with sharp focus, tapping her pen lightly. Your trust structure was smart, she said. Very smart. This proves you're competent, organized, and aware. Mark nodded. I knew something was coming. Linda's tone told me everything. Rebecca closed the folder. Then we prepare. If they attempt conservatorship, we'll crush it. Mark sighed, feeling the exhaustion of betrayal. She's my daughter. Rebecca replied, she may be your daughter, but today she's acting like your enemy. That evening, Mark walked along the shoreline, letting the surf wash over his shoes. The guilt and disappointment tangled inside him like drifting seaweed. He had raised Linda with everything he could offer: school fees, medical bills, her wedding. How had she turned into someone who could betray him for a piece of property? As the waves curled around his ankles, he noticed a woman tossing crumbs to gulls. She glanced over and smiled. Evening, she said. New around here? Mark returned the smile. Just moved in. I'm Mark. She nodded. I'm Emma. Welcome to the neighborhood. Emma watched him for a moment, then tilted her head. You look like a man with heavy thoughts. Mark gave a small laugh. Is it that obvious? Emma shrugged. I've seen the look before. Trouble at home. He hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. But something about her gentle voice made honesty easier. Family trouble, he admitted softly. The kind that hurts more than anything else. Emma nodded slowly. Family betrayal is deeper than a stranger's wound. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here most evenings. Mark murmured, thank you, and meant it. As he walked back to the villa, Mark's phone buzzed. A voicemail from Rebecca. He pressed play. Mr. Benson, I need you to come in tomorrow morning. Something urgent has happened. Her tone was serious, too serious. Mark entered his living room, sat down, and listened again. Urgent. He stared at the darkened windows, his reflection faint against the glass. They moved faster than I expected, he whispered. He turned off the lights and sat in silence, hearing only the ocean outside. The storm building in his life was far worse than the one over the water. At sunrise, Mark drove to Rebecca's office. She met him at the door with a folder in hand. They filed a petition, she said. Eric and Linda are claiming you're mentally unfit to manage your own finances. Mark felt a cold spike in his chest. They actually did it. Rebecca nodded. The hearing is next week. They're trying to take legal control of everything you own. Mark sank into the chair across from her desk. My own daughter, Rebecca's voice softened. Mr. Benson, I've seen this before. Greed makes people believe lies they tell themselves. Rebecca laid out their plan. We need medical proof of your mental clarity, financial records showing decades of stable decisions, and testimony from your notary. Mark nodded mechanically. I'll get everything. Rebecca leaned forward. You need to understand. If they win, they can sell your villa, your assets, even control your bank account. Mark's face hardened. They won't win. Rebecca studied him for a moment and gave a faint smile. Good. Because you're about to fight a battle most people lose. Mark stood slowly. Then I'll win it for all of them. He left her office and sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel until his fingers trembled. The betrayal felt heavier now, sharper, cutting through every old memory of Linda's childhood smiles. But beneath the pain, something stronger awakened: resolve. They think I'm weak, he whispered. They think age makes me blind. He started the engine, eyes narrowing with purpose. They forgot I spent 40 years solving problems people couldn't understand. The coastal road stretched ahead, sun breaking through the morning fog. Mark pressed down on the gas. The war for his dignity had officially begun. Mark spent the next day gathering everything Rebecca needed. He visited his doctor, who completed a full cognitive test with ease. You're sharper than most 40-year-olds, the doctor joked. Mark forced a smile, wishing the compliment eased the hurt. He stopped by the notary's office next, where Mrs. Cole agreed to testify. You understood every document perfectly, she assured him. Anyone saying otherwise is lying. Mark nodded gratefully. By evening, he sat at his kitchen table, paperwork stacked neatly, ready for the courtroom fight. "I won't let them take what I earned," he whispered. That night, Mark returned to the beach for air. The tide was low, reflecting the moon like silver glass. Emma stood in her usual spot, feeding gulls. When she saw him, she smiled gently. "Rough day?" she asked. Mark sighed deeply. "My daughter filed a petition to control my property." Emma's eyes softened. "I'm sorry, Mark. That must feel like losing the ground beneath your feet." He nodded slowly. "It feels worse than strangers attacking me. This is my own family." Emma stepped closer. "Family can break us, but they can't define us. Remember that." The next morning, Mark woke early and reviewed the documents again. The villa was quiet, but inside him, a storm raged. His phone buzzed, another voicemail from Rebecca. "Be prepared," she warned. "Their lawyer is aggressive. They will twist every word." Mark listened twice, letting the warning settle. He walked to the deck and looked at the Pacific waves pounding against the rocks below. "This house was meant to be my peace," he said softly. "Not a battlefield." But he knew peace had a price. Sometimes a man had to defend what he built, even from his own blood. Court day arrived with gray skies and cold wind. Mark wore a navy suit and carried his neatly organized folder. Outside the courthouse, he found Rebecca waiting. "You ready?" she asked. Mark nodded. "Ready as I'll ever be." Inside, Eric and Linda sat with their lawyer. Eric avoided Mark's eyes, but Linda looked at him with a strange mix of guilt and stubbornness. When the judge entered, silence filled the room. The lawyer for Linda and Eric stood and said, "Your Honor, we believe Mr. Benson is unable to make rational decisions." Mark felt those words cut like a knife. Rebecca rose calmly. "Your Honor, the petitioners arrived drunk at Mr. Benson's home at 3 a.m. demanding he sign over his property. We have video proof." Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the footage played. Eric's threats, his friend's laughter, the intimidation, it all filled the room. The judge's expression darkened. Rebecca continued, "We also have proof of the trust Mr. Benson created days before the incident. The structure requires advanced financial understanding." She handed in medical records. "And his doctor confirms excellent cognitive health." The judge leaned back, clearly unimpressed with Linda and Eric's claims. Then came Mark's turn to speak. He stood slowly, facing the judge with steady eyes. "Your Honor," he said, "I worked for 40 years for the home those two tried to take." He lifted the folder. "I have no illness. No confusion. What I do have is a daughter who saw me as money instead of a father." Linda looked down, tears forming. Mark continued, voice calm but full of hurt. "I raised her with everything I had. But I won't let anyone erase my dignity. Not even her." A hush fell over the room as he sat. The judge took only moments to decide. "Petition denied," she said firmly. "Mr. Benson is fully capable of managing his property. Furthermore, the petitioners will pay his legal fees." Eric's mouth fell open. Linda burst into tears. The judge wasn't finished. "Mr. Benson, you are advised to seek a restraining order if necessary." Mark nodded respectfully. As court adjourned, Eric lunged forward, shouting, "You ruined us." Security held him back. Mark didn't flinch. He simply looked at Eric with quiet strength. "No," he said softly. "You ruined yourself." Outside the courthouse, Linda approached Mark with trembling hands. Her voice cracked. "Dad, please listen. I'm sorry. I didn't think it would go this far." Mark looked at her with a mixture of love and disappointment. "You wanted my home more than you wanted me," he said gently. "I can't pretend that didn't happen." Linda wiped her tears. "Can we fix this?" Mark shook his head slowly. "Not today. Not this year. Maybe one day, if your heart truly changes." She nodded weakly, knowing he was right. Then she stepped back, letting him go. When Mark returned to the villa that evening, the ocean breeze felt different, cleaner, calmer. He walked through the room slowly, touching the walls as if greeting them again. This time, the house felt safe. He stood on the deck watching the sunset spread gold across the horizon. Emma appeared on the path below and waved. "How'd it go?" she called. Mark smiled for the first time in weeks. "It's over," he replied. She joined him on the deck, standing beside him in silence. Together, they watched the waves roll in with steady rhythm. Mark sipped warm tea as the last light of day slipped behind the Pacific. "I thought the fight was for this house," he said quietly. "But it wasn't." Emma looked at him gently. "Then what was it for?" Mark breathed deeply, feeling the weight finally leave his shoulders. "For my dignity. For my peace. For my life." Emma placed a hand on his arm. "And you won all of it." Mark looked at the ocean, calm and endless. In that moment, he knew he hadn't lost anything worth keeping, only people who tried to destroy him. What remained was freedom, quiet strength, and the possibility of something new.